An orphan saves a puppy from a ditch, never knowing it was the lost pet of a billionaire heiress. The universe works in mysterious ways, Liam Thomas thought to himself as he knelt in the mud, rain pelting his already soaked jacket. He'd heard those words countless times from Sister Agnes at St. Martin's Home for Children. Tonight, as he reached into the water-filled ditch and felt the faint trembling of the tiny creature, those words echoed with a strange, new resonance. The puppy was barely visible in the gathering darkness, just a small patch of dirty white fur shivering violently against the cold April rain. Its whimpers were growing fainter by the minute. "It's okay," Liam whispered, his 17-year-old voice cracking slightly as he scooped the puppy from the murky water. "I've got you now." The small creature couldn't have been more than 8 weeks old. Its eyes, barely open, looked up at Liam with a trust that made his chest tighten. Nobody had ever looked at him that way before. 3 miles away in the east wing of the Blackwood estate, Elise Montgomery paced her bedroom for the 17th time that hour. The plush cream carpet muffled her footsteps, but nothing could quiet the storm in her chest. Diamond, her 12-week-old Maltese puppy, had been missing for 6 hours now. 6 hours, 14 minutes, and 23 seconds. "We have the best search team money can buy looking for her, Miss Montgomery," her father's assistant had assured her earlier, his voice carrying that familiar note of placating condescension adults often used with her, as if being 24 and the sole heir to the Blackwood fortune somehow made her emotions less valid. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of her suite. Each droplet felt like another tick of the clock. Another moment Diamond spent alone in the storm. "Please be safe," she whispered, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. "Please." Liam hurried through the rain, the puppy tucked inside his jacket. He could feel its tiny heart racing against his chest. Saint-Sur-Mon. Martin's had strict rules about pets, as in, absolutely none allowed. But he couldn't leave this helpless creature to die. He'd have to be careful, sneaky. It wouldn't be the first time he'd bent the rules to do what felt right. The orphanage loomed ahead, a gray stone building that had been his home for the past 7 years. Not that it had ever felt like home. More like a waiting room where he'd been forgotten, left to watch as younger children came and went, adopted into real families while he grew too old, too quiet, too invisible. "Almost there," he murmured to the trembling bundle against his chest. "Just be quiet for me, okay?" As if understanding, the puppy made no sound as Liam slipped through the side entrance that the maintenance staff often left unlocked. He navigated the dim hallways with practiced ease, avoiding the creaky floorboards in Sister Kathleen's office, where light still spilled from beneath the door. His room was on the 3rd floor, the one he'd been moved to after turning 16. The small blessing of aging out of the shared dormitories was privacy, the very thing he needed now. Once safely inside, Liam gently placed the puppy on his threadbare towel. Under the harsh fluorescent light, he could see how truly pitiful the creature looked. Ribs visible beneath matted fur, one eye swollen shut, and what appeared to be a cut on its right front paw. "You're a mess," Liam said softly, retrieving his water bottle and the remains of his dinner roll from his backpack. "But I guess that makes 2 of us." The puppy lapped weakly at the water he offered, and Liam felt something crack open inside him. Something that had been sealed tight for years. Hope, maybe, or purpose. He couldn't quite name it, but it felt dangerously close to caring. Elise couldn't sleep. The search team had called off their efforts at midnight, promising to resume at first light. Her father, Theodore Montgomery, had phoned from Singapore to tell her not to worry, that he'd buy her another puppy if necessary. "Diamond isn't replaceable," she had said, hanging up before he could respond. The rain had finally stopped, giving way to that strange stillness that follows storms. Elise wrapped herself in a cashmere throw and stepped onto her private balcony. The Blackwood estate stretched before her, 50 acres of manicured gardens and woodland that felt more like a beautiful prison than a home. For all her family's wealth, for all the privilege she'd been born into, Elise had never quite escaped the hollow feeling that had taken root after her mother's death 10 years ago. Her father had responded to grief by building an empire, leaving Elise with everything she could ever want, except the one thing she needed, someone who saw her as more than the Montgomery heiress. Diamond had been that someone. The puppy's unconditional affection had been a salve to her loneliness. And now, staring out at the vast darkness of their property, Elise felt more alone than ever. "I'll find you," she promised the night. Whatever it takes." The next morning brought watery sunshine and a new set of challenges for Liam. The puppy, whom he'd started thinking of as lucky, needed food, proper cleaning, and probably a vet. none of which he could provide without raising suspicions. "You're looking shifty this morning, Thomas," remarked Danny, the only other 17-year-old boy still at St. Martin's. "What are you hiding?" "Nothing," Liam said too quickly. "Just didn't sleep well." Danny raised an eyebrow but didn't press. They had an unspoken agreement, formed over years of shared institutional living. Mind your business, and I'll mind mine. After breakfast, Liam slipped back to his room to check on Lucky. The puppy seemed stronger today, eagerly licking Liam's fingers when he reached into the makeshift bed he'd created in his closet. The swelling around its eye had gone down, revealing a bright blue iris that contrasted starkly with the other eye's deep brown. "Heterochromia," Liam murmured, remembering the term from science class. "That's pretty cool, Lucky." What wasn't cool was the expensive-looking collar Liam had discovered hidden beneath the matted fur. A delicate thing of soft pink leather with a heart-shaped tag. The name Diamond was engraved on one side along with a phone number on the back. Liam's stomach sank. Lucky wasn't a stray. She, Diamond, belonged to someone. Someone who was probably worried sick. But calling that number meant giving up the one thing that had made him feel needed in years. The search had intensified. Elise had insisted on joining the team herself, abandoning her usual designer wardrobe for jeans and rubber boots as they combed through the estate's grounds. Her social media post about Diamond, complete with a substantial reward offer, had gone viral overnight. "Miss Montgomery," called Derek, the head of security, "we found something." Elise's heart leaped as she rushed toward him, but hope curdled into disappointment when she saw what he was holding. Just Diamond's leash, muddy and tangled with leaves. She was wearing her collar with the ID tag, Elise said, taking the leash with trembling hands. "If someone found her, they would have called." "Unless they didn't want to," a small voice whispered in her mind. The reward she'd offered was substantial, but to some, a purebred Maltese puppy might be worth more. "We'll keep looking," Derek assured her, but Elise could see the doubt in his eyes. The property bordered a road. Diamond could be miles away by now. For the first time since the search began, Elise allowed herself to consider the possibility that her puppy might not come home. Liam spent the day in turmoil. The right thing to do was obvious. Call the number, return the puppy, end of story. But every time he reached for his ancient flip phone, a donation to the orphanage from some tech company's community outreach program, something stopped him. It wasn't just that he'd grown attached to Lucky, Diamond, in the short time they'd been together. It was the knowledge that once the puppy was gone, he'd go back to being just Liam Thomas, the forgotten boy at St. Martin's, counting down the days until his 18th birthday, when he'd be released into the world with nothing but a high school diploma and a small stipend. "What would you do?" he asked the puppy as she playfully nipped at his shoelaces. She looked healthier already after the smuggled milk and bits of chicken he'd brought her. Diamond responded by rolling onto her back, paws in the air, the picture of contentment. "Yeah, that's helpful," Liam said with a reluctant smile. His phone felt heavy in his pocket. The right choice and the easy choice were two very different things. 3 days had passed since Diamond's disappearance. Elise sat in her father's study, listlessly scrolling through emails from well-meaning friends and business associates expressing their sympathy. The reward had been doubled, then tripled. The local news had even picked up the story. Billionaire's daughter offers small fortune for missing puppy, framing it as either a heartwarming human interest piece or a grotesque display of privilege, depending on which outlet was reporting. None of it mattered if it didn't bring Diamond home. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper who had been with the family since before Elise was born. "There's a young man at the gate," she said gently. "Security called up. He says he found Diamond." Elise was on her feet instantly, heart hammering. "Is she okay? Did they let him in? Why didn't they call me immediately?" "They're bringing him up now," Mrs. Winters replied, her lined face creased with cautious hope. "And yes, he says she's fine." The wait was excruciating. Elise paced the grand foyer, her mind racing between joy and suspicion. Could this be real, or was it someone trying to claim the reward with false information? The massive oak doors finally opened, and a security guard stepped inside, followed by a tall, thin boy who couldn't have been much younger than Elise herself. His clothes were clean but worn, his dark hair cut short in what looked like a home job. In his arms was a small bundle of white fur. "Diamond!" Elise cried, rushing forward. The puppy's head popped up at the sound of her voice, ears perking, and then she was squirming in the boy's arms, yipping with excitement. Elise took her gently, tears streaming unchecked down her face as Diamond covered her chin with frantic licks. "Thank you," she managed to say, looking up at the boy. "Thank you so much." Liam shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. He hadn't expected this. The enormous house, the staff, the beautiful young woman whose joy was so palpable it filled the cavernous entry hall. He'd imagined Diamond's owner as some spoiled child or disinterested adult, someone who wouldn't appreciate the puppy the way he had these past few days. This was worse. This woman clearly loved Diamond as much as he had come to. "I found her in a drainage ditch near Westbrook Road," he explained, his voice sounding rough and out of place in these elegant surroundings. "She was pretty cold and scared, but I think she's okay." "The vet is on his way," the security guard informed Elise. "And miss, about the reward." "Yes, of course," Elise said, reluctantly looking away from Diamond. "Mr. Liam," he supplied. "Liam Thomas. Mr. Thomas deserves every penny. Please see that it's arranged immediately." Liam's face flushed. "I didn't come for the reward." Elise studied him with new interest. There was something in his eyes, a guardedness, a hurt carefully hidden away, that felt strangely familiar. "Mir? Would you stay?" she asked suddenly. "Just until the vet arrives. I'd like to hear exactly how you found her, where she was, everything." Liam knew he should say no. He had to be back at St. Martin's before dinner check. And this place, these people, were so far removed from his world that he felt like an actor who'd wandered onto the wrong movie set. But Diamond was looking at him from the safety of her owner's arms. And there was something in Elise Montgomery's expression that made it impossible to refuse. "Yeah," he said, "I can stay for a little while." A little while turned into hours. The vet came and went, pronouncing Diamond perfectly healthy, aside from some minor dehydration and the healing cut on her paw. Liam found himself seated in an elegant sitting room, awkwardly perched on the edge of a sofa that probably cost more than everything sane. Martins owned combined, telling Elise the story of finding Diamond in the ditch. What he didn't tell her was how he'd almost walked past, how close he'd come to ignoring those faint whimpers. He didn't mention the 3 days he'd hidden her in his room, or how he'd finally called the number on her tag, only after Danny had discovered his secret and threatened to report him if he didn't do the right thing. "I can't believe she survived out there," Elise said, gently stroking Diamond's head as the puppy dozed contentedly in her lap. "The vet said another day in those conditions and..." She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. "She's tougher than she looks," Liam said with a small smile. There was a pause filled only by the ticking of an antique clock and Diamond's soft snores. "You said you're from St. Martin's?" Elise finally asked. "That's the orphanage near Westbrook, isn't it?" Liam stiffened slightly. "Yeah. I'm sorry," she said quickly, noticing his reaction. "That was intrusive." "It's fine," he shrugged. "Not exactly a secret." Elise hesitated, then said, "My mother used to volunteer there years ago. Before she died." "Catherine Montgomery," Liam said, surprising her. "There's a reading room named after her." Something passed between them then, a moment of connection, fragile as spun glass. Two people from vastly different worlds linked by loss and a small white dog who snored obliviously between them. The moment was broken by the return of the security guard, who informed Liam that a car was waiting to take him back to St. Martin's, along with an envelope containing the reward money. "Thank you again," Elise said as they walked to the door. "Not just for finding her, but for taking care of her, for saving her life." Liam nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. He reached out to give Diamond one last pat, and the puppy licked his hand as if to say goodbye. "Maybe," Elise began, then stopped herself. "Never mind." "What?" Liam asked. "I was going to say maybe you could visit sometime. Diamond would like that, I think." The invitation hung in the air between them, unexpected and sincere. "Yeah," Liam said after a moment. "Maybe I could." As the sleek black car pulled away from the Blackwood estate, Liam leaned his head against the cool window glass. The envelope in his pocket contained more money than he'd ever possessed in his life. Enough to give him a real start after graduation, enough to change everything. But it wasn't the money that occupied his thoughts as the sprawling mansion disappeared from view. It was the look in Elise Montgomery's eyes when she'd held Diamond again. Pure, unguarded joy. And beneath that, something he recognized all too well. The same loneliness he saw in the mirror every day. The following weeks brought changes Liam could never have anticipated. The first was the letter that arrived at St. Martin's, addressed to him personally on heavy cream stationery. Inside was a note from Elise, thanking him again for saving Diamond. along with a photograph of the puppy looking healthy and happy on a sun-drenched patio. The second change was Sister Kathleen calling him into her office, her expression unreadable as she informed him that the Montgomery Foundation had established a scholarship in his name, one that would cover his full college tuition and living expenses, should he choose to accept it. Miss Montgomery was quite insistent, Sister Kathleen told him, something like respect creeping into her usually stern voice. She said it was the least she could do for the young man who saved her puppy's life. Liam sat in stunned silence. College had always been a distant dream, something he'd privately yearned for, but knew was probably beyond his reach. And now, there's something else, Sister Kathleen added almost reluctantly. She's asked if you might be interested in a summer job at the estate, something about helping with their grounds and with the dog. The third change was the hardest to define. It was in the way Liam began to hold himself, the way he started raising his hand in class, the new attention he paid to his studies now that they might actually lead somewhere. It was in the careful way he folded Elise's note and tucked it into his battered copy of The Great Gatsby, pulling it out sometimes at night just to look at Diamond's photograph. It was hope, fragile but persistent, taking root where before there had been only resignation. Spring melted into early summer. Liam graduated high school with honors, a fact that seemed to surprise everyone except Sister Agnes, who simply nodded as if she'd known it all along. The day after graduation, a car arrived to take him to the Blackwood estate for his first day of work. Diamond recognized him immediately, bounding across the immaculate lawn with such enthusiasm that she tumbled head over heels before reaching him. Liam knelt to greet her, laughing as she covered his face with excited kisses. "She's been watching the driveway all morning," Elise said, approaching with a smile. She looked different today, more casual in jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. "I think she knew you were coming." Working at the estate was nothing like Liam had imagined. Yes, there were groundskeeping duties, but they were light and flexible. Mostly, it seemed, he was there to be Diamond's companion, while Elise attended to her foundation work and business obligations. "My father believes I need to start taking a more active role in the company," she explained one afternoon as they sat by the pool, watching Diamond chase butterflies across the lawn. "Which means endless meetings and conference calls. Do you want to?" Liam asked. "Take over the company, I mean." Elise was quiet for a moment, absently twisting a strand of hair around her finger. "I want to do something meaningful," she finally said. "The Montgomery Foundation does good work, and I'm proud of that. But the business side, I don't know. It feels like I'm stepping into someone else's shoes." There was something in her voice, a vulnerability, a question, that made Liam look at her more closely. For all her wealth and privilege, Elise Montgomery was wrestling with the same thing he was, trying to figure out her place in the world. "You could always change the shoes," he suggested. "Make them fit you instead of the other way around." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. "When did you get so wise, Liam Thomas? Hanging out with a billionaire heiress?" He deadpanned. "It's very educational." Their laughter startled Diamond, who abandoned her butterfly chase to trot over and investigate the commotion, tail wagging questioningly. As the summer progressed, the lines between employer and employee, between the orphan and the heiress, began to blur. Liam found himself included in dinners at the main house, invited to movie nights in the estate's private theater, asked for his opinion on books Elise was reading. For her part, Elise seemed genuinely interested in his life at St. Martin's, asking questions that revealed a thoughtfulness he hadn't expected. She never pitied him, never made him feel like a charity case. Instead, she listened with real attention, as if his experiences were just as valid as hers, just from a different world. "Tell me about your parents," she asked one evening as they walked Diamond around the estate's small lake. The question was gentle, hesitant. Liam watched a pair of ducks glide across the water, buying time. He rarely talked about his past, had learned early that keeping those wounds covered was safer than exposing them. "Not much to tell," he said finally. "My mom died when I was 8. Capra cancer. My dad, he tried for a while, but he couldn't handle it. Started drinking. Child services stepped in when I was 10, and that was that." He kept his voice neutral, matter of fact, but Elise wasn't fooled. She touched his arm lightly, a gesture of understanding rather than pity. "I was 14 when my mom died," she said quietly. "Car accident. My father buried himself in work afterward. He loves me, I know he does, but he doesn't know how to be present anymore." They stood in silence for a moment, the shared weight of their losses creating a bridge between their worlds. "Diamond's the first thing that's made me feel not alone in a long time," Elise admitted. Liam looked down at the puppy, who was contentedly sniffing at a clump of reeds. "Yeah," he said. "I know what you mean." What neither of them said, what hung in the air between them, was that it wasn't just Diamond anymore. July brought a heat wave and complications. Theodore Montgomery returned from his extended business trip abroad, his presence casting a subtle shadow over the easy rhythm Liam and Elise had established. "So you're the young man who found Diamond?" he said over dinner the night he returned, studying Liam with calculating eyes. "Elise tells me you'll be attending State University this fall. Business major, is it?" "English literature, actually." Liam replied, acutely aware of the perfect Windsor knot in Mr. Montgomery's tie, the gold cufflinks that probably cost more than a year's room and board at St. Martin's. Ah, a world of judgment in that single syllable. "And what do you plan to do with that?" "Dad," Elise interjected, a warning in her voice. "It's a fair question," Theodore said mildly. "Young people should have direction." "I want to teach," Liam said, meeting the older man's gaze directly. "And write, maybe." Theodore nodded, his expression unreadable. "Noble pursuits, if not particularly lucrative." "Not everything is about money, Dad." "No," Theodore agreed, his eyes still on Liam. "But pretending it doesn't matter is a luxury only the wealthy can afford." The rest of the dinner passed in strained conversation, with Elise making increasingly desperate attempts to steer toward neutral topics. By the time dessert arrived, Liam felt like he was back in the Sister Kathleen's office, being assessed and found wanting. "I'm so sorry about that," Elise said later as they sat on the terrace, Diamond dozing between them. "My father can be difficult. He's protective of you," Liam said, surprising himself with his own understanding. "I get it. He thinks everyone has an angle," Elise sighed. "A lifetime in business has made him suspicious." "And what do you think?" Liam asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Elise looked at him then, really looked at him, her eyes searching his face in the soft glow of the terrace lights. "I think you're the first real friend I've had in years," she said simply. "The first person who sees me, not the Montgomery name or bank account. Friend." The words settled between them, at once true and somehow insufficient. August arrived with a sense of impending change. Liam would be moving into his dorm at State University in just a few weeks. Elise was preparing for increased responsibilities at the Montgomery Foundation. Their summer at Blackwood Estate was drawing to a close. "I have something for you," Elise said one afternoon, holding out a small wrapped package. An early going-away present. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with his initials. "For all those stories you're going to write," she explained, a hint of shyness in her smile. "Elise, Liam began, but she shook her head. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise you'll use it." He nodded, unable to find words adequate to express what the gift, what this entire summer, had meant to him. They were interrupted by Diamond, who came tearing across the lawn in pursuit of a squirrel, only to skid to a comical halt when her quarry scampered up a tree. Her disappointed expression was so human-like that they both burst out laughing. "She's come so far from that scared little puppy in the ditch," Elise observed, her laughter softening to a fond smile. "We all have," Liam replied quietly. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing all summer. Liam leaned forward slightly, drawn by a gravity he couldn't resist, and Elise did the same. The moment was shattered by the sound of a car on the driveway. Theodore Montgomery had returned early from his business trip to New York. The days that followed were tense. Theodore made his disapproval clear through pointed comments and questions about Liam's background, his future plans, his suitability as Elise's companion, as he put it with delicate emphasis. "He's trying to drive you away," Elise said angrily after a particularly uncomfortable dinner. They were in the garden, Diamond playing with her favorite ball nearby. "I'm so sorry, Liam. Maybe he's right," Liam said, the doubts that had been gnawing at him finally breaking through. "We're from different worlds, Elise. This summer has been amazing. But what happens when real life starts again? When I'm just a scholarship student and you're running a billion-dollar empire? Is that all this summer has been to you?" she asked, hurt flashing in her eyes. "Some kind of fantasy break from real life?" "No, that's not what I meant. Because this is real to me," she continued, her voice catching. "You and me, what we found here, it's the most real thing in my life." Liam closed his eyes briefly, struggling to find the right words. "Your father sees what everyone else will see. An orphan with nothing to his name getting close to one of the richest women in the country. The scholarship, this job, people will say I'm using you." "Since when do you care what people say?" Elise challenged. "The Liam I know makes his own path. The Liam you know has only existed for 3 months. He shot back, frustration bubbling over. Before I found Diamond, I was nobody. After this summer, I go back to being nobody. You were never nobody, Elise said fiercely. Not to Diamond, and certainly not to me. As if hearing her name, Diamond trotted over, dropping her ball at their feet and looking between them with concerned eyes. The simple gesture, so trusting, so present, deflated Liam's anger instantly. I'm afraid, he admitted quietly, bending to pick up the ball. Afraid that whatever this is between us can't survive outside this perfect summer bubble? Elise stepped closer, taking his free hand in hers. Then we make a new bubble, she said simply. One big enough for the real world. The night before Liam was due to leave for university, Theodore Montgomery requested a private word. They met in his study, a masculine space of dark wood and leather that seemed designed to intimidate. I've been watching you this summer, Mr. Thomas? Theodore began without preamble. My daughter believes you hung the moon and stars. Diamond certainly adores you, but I remain concerned. Liam waited, refusing to be baited into a defensive response. You're a young man with ambition but without means. Theodore continued. Elise represents opportunity. I would be remiss as a father if I didn't consider that fact. With all due respect, sir, Liam said, choosing his words carefully. If I were after Elise's money, I wouldn't be leaving tomorrow for a dorm room and cafeteria food. I'd be figuring out how to stay right here. Theodore's eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Fair point, he acknowledged. But it doesn't change the fact that you and my daughter come from vastly different backgrounds. Those differences don't disappear with pretty words and summer romances. No, Liam agreed. They don't, but they don't have to be barriers either. Theodore studied him for a long moment. You know, when my wife died, I did what I thought was best for Elise. I built security around her. Financial security, physical security. What I failed to build was emotional security. He sighed, suddenly looking older. Catherine would have seen that immediately. Liam remained silent, sensing that Theodore was speaking as much to himself as to him. My daughter smiles more when you're around, Theodore said finally. She laughs more. Diamond found her way to you for a reason, perhaps. He reached into his desk drawer and extracted an envelope. This is for you. Liam took it hesitantly. Inside was a check for an amount that made his eyes widen. Sir, I can't accept. It's not a bribe to stay away, if that's what you're thinking. Theodore interrupted dryly. Nor is it a test to see if you're after money. It's practical. University has expenses beyond tuition. Books, supplies, proper winter clothing. Consider it an investment in your future. My future, Liam repeated carefully. Yes, Theodore said, meeting his gaze steadily. Whatever that may entail. It wasn't approval, not exactly, but it was an acknowledgement. A reluctant recognition that perhaps Theodore Montgomery didn't know everything after all. The morning of Liam's departure dawned clear and bright, as if the weather itself was optimistic about new beginnings. Diamond seemed to sense the significance of the day, sticking close to Liam as he loaded his few belongings into the car that would take him to campus. She's going to miss you, Elise said, watching as Diamond pressed herself against Liam's leg. We both will. It's only an hour away, Liam reminded her. And there are weekends. And holidays, Elise added. And video calls. And eventually summers again. They were making plans, building bridges between their worlds. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But they had already come so far from that rainy night when a desperate puppy and a lonely boy found each other in a ditch. I have something for you, Liam said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small carved wooden figure of a dog, its details simple but unmistakably reminiscent of Diamond. I made it in the wood shop at St. Martin's. It's not fancy, but it's perfect. Elise interrupted, taking it reverently. Absolutely perfect. They stood close, the morning sun warming their faces, Diamond dancing impatiently around their feet. In the distance, Theodore watched from the terrace, his expression thoughtful. Ready? Elise asked softly. Liam looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the strength in her eyes, the determination in her smile. He thought about the scared puppy in the ditch, about second chances and unexpected connections, about how sometimes the universe does work in mysterious ways. Ready, he said, and knew it was true. As the car pulled away from Blackwood Estate, Liam watched in the side mirror as Elise stood waving, Diamond cradled in her arms. Not goodbye, he thought. Just us, see you later. 3 years later, as autumn leaves drifted across the Blackwood Estate, Diamond, now a dignified adult dog, supervised from her favorite sunny spot as Liam helped Elise set up the last details for the grand opening of the Montgomery Thomas Youth Center. The former east wing of the mansion had been transformed into a space for orphaned teenagers to receive mentoring, educational support, and yes, occasional visits from therapy dogs. Sister Agnes is going to cry when she sees this, Liam predicted, adjusting a framed photograph of Sane. Martin's on the wall. Good tears, I hope, Elise replied, leaning into his side. The best kind, he assured her. Their journey hadn't been without challenges. There had been adjustments and misunderstandings, cultural gaps to bridge and prejudices to overcome. But through it all, they had held on to the truth they discovered that summer, that sometimes the most unlikely connections are the ones that save us. Theodore Montgomery, to everyone's surprise, had become one of their strongest supporters. Diamond has good instincts, he declared after watching Liam graduate summa cum laude the previous spring. She knew what she was doing when she got herself stuck in that ditch. Now as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the estate grounds, Liam took Elise's hand in his. Diamond, sensing the moment, trotted over to press against their legs, completing their circle. Not bad for an orphan who once saved a puppy from a ditch, Liam said quietly. Not bad at all, Elise agreed, squeezing his hand. Though I think we both know who really saved whom. Diamond wagged her tail in apparent agreement, her mismatched eyes bright with the wisdom of creatures who understand, better than humans sometimes, how hearts find their way home.